One. So what we're going to do is that we're going to start. I'm going to start asking the speakers certain basic questions about pig farming, and they will answer accordingly. And then after that, what I'll do is that I'll open up the floor to the listeners so that they can also ask the speakers direct questions. And yeah, so the rule is speakers, when you speak, please unmute yourself. And when you're done speaking, just mute yourself so that we can give the other speakers chance to be clear and audible. All righty, so let's get to it. I will start with you, Kavita. Please tell us about pigs. Let's start with the life of a pig. Why is pig farming profitable, in your opinion?
Hi everyone, Kavita here. The reason I think pig farming is really profitable is how trackable the whole process is. I think out of every animal that I've grown, it's the one that I've found that taking care of it is a bit simplistic in a way of that. Raise a pig, give it the correct feeds, and put it in the right environment, and you're sure of going to market between 6 and 8 months. The reason in Kenya, I'd say that it's profitable, it's because it's white meat and there's been a growing demand for that, especially with a growing population of younger people that are not stuck in the old meat system because before pig farming really took off in Kenya, the major consumption was mostly for goat and beef, but there's just a growing demand for pork and bacon that is higher than before. And in many cases, like in my cases, it's more than we can supply, especially in my region.
Thank you so much for that, Kavita. Stuart, I'd also like to ask you a similar question, but I think I'll just dive straight into breeds. You know, we are used to, well, I'll speak for myself. Pigs are pink, you know, they look like animal farm pigs. So tell us more about breeds and what breeds are the best to work with and start with.
Thank you very much for the question, and thanks for organizing this. Breeds are an interesting question. The most common breed is actually a combination. So, if you look at the global pork market, the most prominent female line would be crossing a Yorkshire pig with a landrace pig. So, those are the two breeds that would go into a female. And then for a boar line or the male line, Duroc or some sort of a Duroc hybrid would be the main breed that we use in North America, and I know that, and also in Europe, although they'll use a breed also called Pietrin in Europe a little bit more than we will. The so that's kind of the most common, but there's also some differences in terms of localized or regional markets. So sometimes, there might be a native breed that is in higher demand. But for the regular market, yeah, the it's a Duroc crossed with a York Landrace, and the Duroc pig is an interesting breed in that it's just a collection of a whole bunch of old world breeds that came to North America, including what they believe are red pigs from the west coast of Africa. So there was different pigs that were brought from the west coast of Africa along with Europe when North America was settled. And those breeds actually kind of were used and combined until the Duroc breed emerged out of all of that crossbreeding.
Wow, so insightful. Thank you so much, Stuart. Farmgirl, over to you. You are here in South Africa, and most of our listeners are also here in South Africa. Tell us why you decided to start with your pig farming and which breeds you find most successful here.
Good evening, guys. Can you repeat your question again, Gugu?
No problem. So, obviously, you are from South Africa, and I was just speaking more on how our listeners are also from here. And we just wanted you to tell us why pig farming and which breeds you are focusing on and why.
Oh, thank you. I chose pig farming because their breeding rate is higher. They might eat a lot, but the profit is more. Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
Hello, Farm Girl, we can hear
Oh,
you.
sorry.
Yes.
Yes, I was saying that pork has the highest consumption. About 36% of the meat eaten in worldwide is pork. So I chose pig farming while everybody was like against the idea of me raising pigs because pigs eat a lot and the feed is way expensive. So I chose it because I'm actually I'm actually very uh hello.
We can still hear you, girl. You can continue.
Oh, okay. I was saying that piglets can be weaned at 2 to 4 weeks and you can slaughter them in 4 months. So I've worked with cattle, I've worked with goats, I've worked with sheep, and I realized that between all of them, the pigs have the highest winning weight than all of them. So I don't know if I make sense.
Yes, absolutely, you do. Thank you so much for that. And now we really want to understand how to take care of pigs, because we will have the stereotype that pigs eat just about anything. How do you guys deal with the biosecurity? How do you guys deal with the salmonella strains that are going around caused by pigs? Like, how do you keep them clean and how do you literally take them from farm to fork? Stuart, I'll direct that to you.
Well, it's both kind of it's simple but also complicated in that there's a lot of steps. But the keys are good ingredients. So for when you talked about feed, if you start with poor maize or poor corn, you're not going to have good feed. So it's really important to have trusted suppliers if you're not your own supplier of feed grains, because that's the basis of everything for pork production. Is good quality feed, and then the second is animal health. And the best routes to animal health, beyond being very careful with selection of breeding stock, is proper sanitation. And so, Farm Girl was referencing, when we're weaning a piglet. So something that's standard protocol on all of our sow farms is when we wean that piglet and we move that sow into the breeding area, before we put any new sow into that farrowing pen, everything is pressure washed, scraped down, and pressure washed, and then disinfected. So a multi-step process to get rid of all of the pathogens out of that pen before we bring in a new litter of piglets. So and then we repeat that process all the way through. So when we wean a piglet from the sow, it will go to a nursery, kind of a specialized area for young pigs, and they'll stay there for about 5 weeks, and then we'll move them onto a finisher. But before we put the next group in, we scrape down, pressure wash, and disinfect, and then same before we put a new group in the finisher. So sanitation, healthy breeding stock, and good quality feed grains. We're really lucky in Canada that we've got a pretty well regulated feed system. I know in my travels in Kenya, we have run into issues with dairy farmers where perhaps they were buying a dairy meal that was maybe the feed tag said it had certain nutrients, but if you actually analyzed it, you weren't getting what you paid for, so to speak. So that's why I guess I referenced for friends in different countries that trusting your feed source and actually making sure that you're getting what you're paying for.
That is absolutely correct. And I think so important. And I really want to take it back to people like myself, small scale farmers. Kavita Ndolo, please share some light here. What do you think a small scale farmer, how do you think a small scale farmer can start a business without having much resources in terms of what pigs need, in terms of machinery, sanitation? Can we breed and grow pigs and keep them healthy organically or sustainably with not a lot of money? Because most of us, funding is always an issue. Sorry. and we'd like to do as much as we can with the little that we have. So how can we navigate that?
That's actually exactly what I've done with my farm because I started small scale. So what I did a year ago, actually 2 years ago, I started visiting a friend of mine who farms. So I think the most important thing is having someone who's probably doing it may be medium scale, not even large scale, but is doing much better than you and has been in the industry longer than you. So you learn from them and they sort of help you through that process. It's almost similar to what you do with like chicken broilers. So you can start with a small structure, then with time as you expand your farm, you can get to bigger structures, and then you don't even have to start with machinery. So what you need is that maybe an area where they can drink water and it's not getting soiled because I mean sometimes they'll play with it. So you might have to install just like a simple water system, and even if you're not doing like automatic feeding, you can use feeding troughs. And then as long as the where the stain is properly drained, then and you're cleaning it often every day, then you can start from just small numbers. And especially like what I advise people is to start with fattening of piglets at first because that will help you make your money back with time, and then you reserve some of that stock or get stock from someone for yourself so that then you can start your own reproduction. So you can decide either to get into the business of just always fattening. You get piglets that have been weaned and then you raise them for 4 to 5 months and then you sell them. Or you can do a mixture of both, that for a while, for the sake of your cash flow, you fatten and then at the same time, you're building a stock through your sows and then you expand accordingly. So, for instance, myself, I started with a capacity of just 20 pigs. And then 4 months later, I was able to double that capacity. And now, a year later, I have almost done that 5 times because now my capacity is about 150 pigs in terms of the housing that I've done. So, you should not feel the pressure to have so many animals and you cannot house them and you cannot feed them. And I think there's something still that mentioned, especially in terms of feed quality. It's a lot of people might want to use like waste products and things like that, but if you can use that as least as possible, and especially if you're getting like what they call soil, which is like whatever is left over at restaurants or schools, you probably need to boil it again before giving it to them. But if you can find local solutions, you may not have to use your commercial feeding programs, but instead you can make your own feeds. That is what I do. So I'll buy some maize and millet and then mixed with some flour cake and things like that. And then you try to buy your feed ingredients from the producer. So instead of going to the shop, you'll find a farmer that's selling a specific component that you need, and that way you can cut prices. And even in terms of quality, you'll be assured because you'll probably be getting a lot of your products before they get preservatives and things like that, and then you're going to use them fresh, and that will be of huge benefit to your pigs. And then another final thing I could add is that if you have other things on your farm that you can feed them, like traditional vegetables and cabbages and things like that, they love that. So if you're doing like acres of cabbage or acres of kales or something like that, or greens, whatever is left over, or sometimes when you harvest, a portion of it could go and yeah, they love greens, although that will not be the main ingredient of what you're doing. But just getting your feed prices right and reducing that cost by making your own feeds could make the biggest difference in terms of profitability for a small scale farmer.
Thank you so much for touching on that, Kavita. And I really want to delve deep into the market as well. Over to you, Farm Girl. Pigs obviously need proper and adequate housing, right? And what I have realized with especially the government this side when it comes to wanting to start your own pig farm is that they'll always ask you, do you have a permanent structure that you're going to build? And I think the topic here is that, you know, acquiring land is a problem, is is a difficulty when it comes to us here in South Africa. So if you want to start a pig farm, and you don't have land, how are you going to build your permanent structure? Like, how can you start a pig farm, whereas you don't have land to actually build this permanent structure that the pigs need?
Thank you, Sis Gugu. What you're saying is true. Land is an issue this side. So what you can do, and people don't like staying with pigs around the village or around them wherever. But what you can do, you can find a communal land somewhere and then just fence it. That's when maybe you can opt for a free ranging. If you don't have money for the structure, you can just opt for free range until at least the piggery starts generating money for you. That's when you can be able to start building your own structures.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I'll hand it over to you, Stuart. We want to talk market prices now. Clearly, pig farming is profitable. So tell us more about who we can sell it to. If you're also involved in the export business, please shed some light on that as well.
Okay, that's a big question, because profitability in pigs, yes, pigs can be very profitable, but there also can be times when, at least in our North American market, where sometimes expenses will outstrip the revenues. So I think something that is important with pigs, and Kavita did a great job of explaining his process for how he's grown. It's important for us to remember that we should always be keeping some reserve around, and because it's profitable this year, maybe next year we can have some challenges. So I know our own farm, sometimes if we forget that things can go bad once in a while, we can get ourselves into trouble. But anyways, that's to the marketing, and I want to maybe take one step back. Kavita did a really good job of talking about utilizing local feed grains, and then looking at ways to supplement. One of the most important things when we're selling pork, and it doesn't matter whether we're the biggest pig farm in the world or we only keep one pig, we want to make sure that we're making a healthy and safe product for whoever might be eating that. And something that is still common that we have to be careful of, especially as smallholder pig farms. Kavita referenced how we can feed. Maybe you've got a school or a restaurant where you can get some waste, or we would maybe call that swill. You want to be careful. You can use these products, but you want to be careful to keep the product safe, because if we take uncooked or human food, sometimes we can pass diseases on to our pigs. And so we want to be careful, because if we do that, and then maybe it leads to a pork that isn't safe. There's a few different parasites and things that can get into our pig meat. So it's really important that we take steps at the farm, whether we've got one pig or 10,000 pigs, to make sure that we're keeping that meat safe, because the quickest way to having people eat less pork is if it's not a high quality product. So that's really important, and I think it's really exciting to I've witnessed what Kavita is referencing, how in certain countries where pork was not traditionally a food that was eaten, people are finding out it's pork is really good. Like when you boil it all down, pork is really good, and for everyday families, it might be more affordable than beef, and maybe sometimes even chicken. So we've got this really great product. We just want to make sure that we raise a safe product, and we do our job at the farm, because that's a way that if we have people that are getting sick from pork, or we're cutting our corners, or we're not raising good pigs, that's the quickest way to get people to stop eating more. So I don't think maybe I didn't answer your question exactly, but just I guess maybe just trying to take a step back. But to the part about exports and where this all comes together, countries will get really cranky if we can only export safe food. So, for instance, Canada, we can export food all over the world, and we're really lucky because of that. But part of that is because we've got really intense food safety regulations, not just at the farm, but in the packing house and all the way through. So you also want to make sure as a pork farmer that you've got, if you're raising a really good pig, you want to make sure you're working with a good butcher, so that they're doing their job and they're keeping their butcher shop clean and safe, so that that meat is then is going to be a good product. So it really requires participation from our suppliers, the people that grow our maize or the other things that we might be using for our feed. And then we need to do our job on the farm. Things like, if we're feeding food waste, making sure we're boiling it, and using the highest quality feed ingredients. And then we want to make sure that we're working with reputable partners, at the butchery, whether that's a small local butchery or a large packing house that is killing hundreds of animals a day.
I think you touched on a very important fact, Stuart, is that we need to always take a step back, because sometimes we are so focused, well, especially me, I'll talk for myself, that sometimes we're just so focused on what is going to make us money, and not really the whole process that goes behind that. So actually, I really would like to go back to you, Farm Girl, because, you're a young female and you are doing great things, and you just transitioned, actually, you're now doing pig farming because it was your passion. Let's talk numbers here in South Africa. If you wanted, because I think you guys gave us a general feel to when pigs can be slaughtered around like age 4 to 6 months, right? Then you can decide whether you sell it as as pork or as bacon. What are you producing? Who do you work with? Do you own the entire supply chain in terms of growing the pigs and then cutting them up and selling your produce? And how is that going in terms of numbers?
Well, for me, I don't have a market for my pigs because in the Northwest, there's actually a very few abattoirs that are working with pigs. So myself, I just decided to open the market for myself. I grow the pockets. I grow pockets, and then from there I take them to the nearest abattoir. They just clean it up for me, put the stamps, and then I come to slice it up for myself and sell it locally. I sell it as a cooked meat. I sell it as just raw meat, and then it's been going so great. So the more I grow, is the more I'm trying to identify. There's a lot of abattoirs that I have recently found out about I think it was in Brett's or it was in Rustenburg. So those are the places that I've been looking into because in my side of the Northwest, there isn't really much abattoirs that I can work with.
All right, no, thank you for that. And you're doing great things, and we support you 120%. Kavita, I'll move on to you in terms of market. Tell us more about how that's going for you, and let's also speak numbers. Let's say, I've started with 10 pigs, and God willingly, I do everything by the book. Let's talk profits. How much money will I make?
Personally for me, like my market is similar to what Farm Girl has. It's local to have luckily I have someone at the butchery who comes and off takes all my pigs. That took almost 6 months to get that person. So I had to walk around and find out like who's been selling these products. Before that, I had to ship them to almost another county. So I had to at least have 10 to 15 ready every season. But since I got local market, my metrics have changed. The other farmers have around me have owned the entire value system, like Farm Girl has, so they'll slaughter and sell and sometimes cook. But mine, like the matrix that I have is there are two ways. Like I have, I'll give my numbers in. I'll try convert it to American dollars for everyone to understand, since this is an international space. So let's say I'll get my piglets at $35 each, and usually for it to be profitable, I'll get like 20 per month. But using a similar scale, you can still work with like 10 per month. And then throughout the entire period, because I got them for $35, they'll consume feed, each of them, like from the time I buy them, at between 2 and 3 months. That's when I acquire them from the guy I get them from. I'll stay with them between 4 and 5 months, and on average, it will consume anything between $35 and $45. So the cost of production up to the point that I sell is already anything between $70 and $90. Then I'll sell them per kg, and I'll get on average a profit of between $40 and $50 by selling them at around 270 per kg. Anything between 270, like that's like $2.5, like $2.50 per kg. So usually I'll have to sell them at 70 kg market rate for it to be profitable. When you do those numbers, when you're selling a few pigs per month, it's not as profitable. So it's always better get um, to get more piglets at once. In my case, I get between 20 and 30, and then after a while, once you start your own reproduction, then your sows can give you 10 and above every time. So it depends on the soil. Some will give you even 20. And as they keep reproducing, then you can increase faster at a lower cost. But on my experience locally is that your profit will be between $40 and $50 per pig. And it's always best when you have more. But the scale has to be watched, because the more pigs you have, the more feeds that you will need, because they are heavy feeders. If it's not gaining weight, it's probably losing weight, and you don't want them, not having a good streak to that. So you scale yourself properly according to that, and then you also make sure that you have a growing demand, and you have at least backup suppliers, because you can have someone that has been off taking your product, and then they find someone else who's cheaper, probably someone who's starting and is not aware of market prices, and you go to that guy. And if maybe I planned to sell like 10 pigs this week, and I'm being told that I need to sell them next week, those guys will be eating at least like 3 kgs of feed every day each. It means that's 30 kg feed every day, and it will not translate similarly in terms of prices. So that 1 week can cost you a lot of money in feeding that will not reflect on selling. So you need to be market aware and watch the trends, and just establish good relationships with the people that of taking your products. Yep. I think that's it, Google. Can you hear me?
I'm afraid our host might have had a microphone issue again, maybe.
Yeah, because I think she's muted or something.
You raised a very good point at the end, Kavita, about timeliness of marketing. And if you're planning on selling 10 pigs today, if you don't get to sell them today and it doesn't get sold until next week, you've increased your expenses without increasing your revenues, because generally you're not going to get the same amount of. So that's something that's really important. And I think, I bring that up because it's very topical for us right now. Our largest customer, their plant has been closed for COVID cases. So we haven't shipped. To that customer, we would normally ship 200 animals every week. That is how much we would normally send them. And we haven't sent them an animal for 3 weeks, and we won't get to send anything till next week. So we have 800 pigs that would normally have been sent to market, that are not. And each one of those animals costs about $1.20 a day to feed. So those, like what you said about timeliness of marketing, and that's very, very important tool, and something very important to think about. Oh, Maybe our host can hear us. She's just having some challenges with her microphone.
Yeah.
We could maybe try to, because it would be a shame to lose the space with so many people in here. We could try to keep communicating via written, Google it, and try to keep having the conversation amongst Kavita. Maybe a question for Farm Girl. How did you teach yourself to cut up the meat and figure out what different products were wanted if pork was new? Like, can you talk about that process of figuring out what the people in your area wanted to eat?
Oh, I have meat cutters here. I have 2 workers that are meat cutters that have previously worked with the ShopRite, Choppies. So those are the people that have been teaching me, and I have been researching about it a lot. So yeah, and again, I've worked with a couple of meat types. So maybe that's where I learned it again. I don't know if that answered your question, Stuart.
So you were able to learn from others who had some experience in doing meat cutting.
Yes. Luckily, I can do that by myself now.
One little note that I was going to ask, Farm Girl, you mentioned about creating outdoor spaces for the pigs if you wanted to try to save some money on building materials, and I think that's a very excellent point for people who are looking at starting new. One little note, we actually have, even in Canada where we have winter, there's some pigs that will give outdoor access. Something that we always talk about that's very important for a pig is pigs can handle varying temperatures, whether it be hot or cold. However,